All right. Looks like we're live. Oh, let me turn that off. Um, so it just popped on to do a quick live stream. See if anybody wants to join. I do enjoy these spontaneous ones. So it's always a gamble to see if anybody will be able to join, though. Also, with time zones and everything, I don't know. Um, yeah, it's 1 p.m. here in South Africa, but I don't know where all you guys are. I know there's a couple of you in the US, so I think it's like morning there. Um, let's see if anybody joins us. Um, yeah, in the meantime, I will just hang around here, probably in silence, and wait for anybody to join. Yeah. So if anybody watches the replay of this and wants to join me in just some sitting, because that's what I'll be doing. I'll just use this time just to sit, and I'll invite anybody to join if you're watching the replay of this. And who knows where the rest of the live's going to go? Maybe we just sit and meditate. Maybe somebody pops on with some questions, and then we can chat. But for now, if there's anybody following with me, you can just sit. Maybe a pointing can be to not modulate attention, or you're not trying to guide attention anywhere really. A great pointing that kind of helps take me deep, or kind of let go is what's primary to any experience, right? Before we try to do anything, what's here before that? So we're trying to do something, trying to make attention a certain way, but what's here before that? What's experience like before try to make it into something? And we don't, it's just what is the most primary aspect of your experience. So you can't make this happen. You can't, it's not something to get to. When I'm talking about it, it's an invitation to go directly to your own experience and feel into what's most primary before you try to make anything happen. So not something for the mind to do. If the mind starts trying to do, that's fine. We don't fight it, because then that's just fueling it up. It's what's here before that. What is the most primary aspect of experience for you? And you're just feeling into experience. It's not a thinking exercise. And you just, so stopping in a certain way. And then you just rest whatever feels most primary. Kind of let it explore itself. can feel like what is always here. You can even feel into a pointing that works well for me is if you imagine a time in the past, some memory from maybe years ago or whatever jumps out to you, and then what has not changed from then to now in your experience. What was experiencing then and what is experiencing now. So, if I think back to a memory from childhood or something, what it feels the same, what's never changed, no matter how much the external world seems to have changed, what's fundamental to experience itself is unchanged. And can sometimes we get so pulled into the thought world that feels like it's also real, but and then we stray from this place. Maybe while you're meditating, you can find your way to this like uncaused place, but it can feel so hard to access when we're pulled into the thought world. But it's always there. We just kind of need to stop. And it definitely helps, it really definitely helps to take the time to put away distractions and feel into this through like formal meditation practice or just sitting for half an hour a day or whatever. Because it's becomes so much more accessible in daily life then. It's like practicing so that then we can access this when we're not in such a isolated environment. And that's really what the practice can eventually become. Is it's not just about becoming a good meditator who can sit on a mat and find peace or deep calm states of mind. It's about and there's definitely different like seasons or periods. There's going to be a time where maybe you do step back from the world, and I went through a period like that where I was completely very isolated from the world, and it was very necessary for me to do the inner work. But then it's about the next step is how do you bring this into the messiness of the full human experience. And that can be difficult, especially if we got comfortable in the identity of being a good meditator and got comfortable in that environment, to then re-engage as much as possible with the messiness of the full human experience can be quite a change. But it's really, that's where the rubber meets the road. I'm reading an Adyashanti book at the moment about like post-awakening integration. It's a really good book. It's called The End of Your World. I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in these deeper aspects of meditation and awakening. It's relevant wherever you are because it really helps to make clear a lot of the things that stumbling blocks that people get caught on and whatnot. Anyways, he talks about how the rubber really meets the road when you come back and engage with the world, because that will bring out all of your conditioning and resistance patterns that you were unable to see, that weren't getting really triggered sitting at home meditating, but then you get thrust into all of the reactivity that comes up with dealing with other people. And what's a great pointer as well is it's always an inside job. It's so easy to blame a situation or an interaction with a person for losing peace or for triggering us, right? It's like, I would have remained calm and whatever it is, not everybody's in that place, but it's so easy to blame what's triggering us on the situation or the person or the interaction. But it's really not that. It's what is that interaction bringing up in us that we haven't faced it or that we're unwilling to face. And that's why that work is so important of, can you go out into the world and see what you're not willing to see about yourself, what's still driving some subconscious behavior or whatnot. And it's always an inside job in the fact that it's always something about us that somebody else is bringing up. It's never a great quote from the book I'm reading at the moment that Adyashanti says is, awake nature, or that awake nature that you're finding is not afraid of unawake nature, which doesn't really feel like the right word, but it's not afraid, because we can take that perspective when we develop like a spiritual ego of some sort of, I'm having these insights or whatnot, and I can see these other people are still mind identified or acting from a place of contraction. But true awake nature doesn't shy away from that. So it's our own still resistances and whatnot that is getting brought up, and if and that's where the work goes toward is what's just from our own personal experience. There was quite. I'm still. This is kind of where the work is for me at the moment, is trying to integrate with the world and still find how to deepen this in the messiness of life. And it's very disorientating and confusing at times, and can lots of resistance and contraction and old seeking behaviors come up and can get caught up in all of that. But what was very helpful for me was, like, what do I do when somebody triggers me with something they say? How do I react? Or what's an awake or an aware way to respond? And I think it was probably from Angelo or somebody that I learned that you just got to feel what is this bringing up in me. And it's incredible how powerful that is when you're feeling that strong reactivity, which specifically I was feeling a lot when I moved out of my own isolated environment of living on my own and meditating, and my world was very much my own. I wasn't dealing with much, because I was when I was recovering from this illness, and I just kind of was doing what I needed to do. But then the next stage was to go out in the world again and move back to stay with my family. And there was initially so much of that, them saying something that would trigger something in me, and then it's like eventually it was realizing like, oh, I just got to feel like what is so uncomfortable here, and just sit with that. It's not about, I mean, sometimes we can respond to certain things, but a lot of the work with reactivity is feeling into that uncomfortableness. And it's incredible how just that work of just feeling is so powerful, and how the reactivity kind of dissolves over time. And it becomes so obvious that it was an unwillingness to feel something that was being brought up by this interaction that then causes you to want to put blame onto the other person or judgment or whatever. And it's crazy how after doing that for a while, the similar type of thing starts to happen, and that need to react just kind of dissolves, and you can just kind of sit with it more. So just sharing from my own personal experience what that work can feel like. But it needs a continuous attitude of being willing to see what am I still hiding from? What am I still avoiding? Because even after having practiced this for a lot, there's still lots of uncomfortable stuff that comes up, and a tendency to initially want to react to the interaction, or put the blame on someone. But it's so helpful when you can just see that, you can just see those patterns kind of arising in yourself. And then sometimes you maybe only realize it afterwards, even where, oh shit, I reacted from a place of ego there, or separate identification, or whatever you want to call it. That's where honesty and authenticity is so important. It's just, like, it doesn't have to be personal, right? It can be like, oh, look at this frustration coming up inside of me. Whereas in the past, we might have been purely identified with that this interaction is making me frustrated. I am now frustrated and going to act like, what do I do about this frustration, or this person's pissing me off, or whatever. Whereas for me now, it's more seen from a place of, oh look, frustration is arising, or there's frustration. Can I feel into it? Again, sometimes there's initial resistance to it, and sometimes we get caught in that view. But then that's why it's such a great thing when we can be aware of what's arising, is we're no longer caught behind that view. You can now see it as just what's arising, frustration, anger, whatever. We don't have to identify with it. And then you can just feel into it. You can, maybe once the interaction's over, or the next time you take some time to sit and meditate, you can do some inquiry. Why am I unwilling to feel that? What beliefs am I not seeing? What am I avoiding? For me, that's the key here. That drives so much behavior. What do I not want to feel? What do I not want to accept? Or what am I avoiding by doing this? Especially if I'm distracting, or behaving, or just doing certain activities that don't feel like they line up with wanting to deepen this awakening, or this path of becoming more, deepening this whole process. If I'm doing that, it's because I'm avoiding something generally, always. So for me, that's a deep inquiry, and it can feel really uncomfortable. and that's almost the key, is um, where do I not want to go, right? Like, if something comes up that really feels uncomfortable, like that's what you got to inquire into, and it requires a certain level of courage, or um, yeah, a willingness to go there. So, anyways, that's just some sharing from my own personal journey. Uh, hey, Timmy, um, sorry to hear that. Grief can be. I mean, I really don't know much about you or your experience, so I don't have much to. Um, yeah, I don't know how much I can say to help because I don't have a lot there. But I'll just say something about grief. It's another really difficult emotion that can be so hard to feel. But I would just go, and that can drive a lot of like this fear of feeling the grief can keep us stuck. You know what wants to be felt will often keep coming up. But it can feel so scary or difficult with an intense emotion like grief. Um, but my suggestion would be to try to feel your way through it. The way I speak about in my other videos and live streams is, um, can you kind of meet those really scary, intense emotions with a feeling of compassion and acceptance? Um, but compassion is really key here because we're so used to repressing these emotions, and avoiding them and running from them and fighting them. You know, especially these difficult emotions like shame and guilt and grief and um, sadness and whatever it is. For certain people, certain emotions are more difficult. Um, but to meet these emotions with a feeling of compassion, and a kind of welcoming, and it's just like it's okay, and you can talk to yourself, you can talk to the emotion, but it's okay for me to feel this, can be really relieving, especially if it's something that's been troubling us for a long time. But it can still be so difficult. Um, so, maybe like start by dipping your toes in and see what comes up. Is what if I say it's okay to feel this, and maybe some fear comes up because it can feel like it's going to be overwhelming if I really let that emotion in. But the more we can welcome it and be like, it's okay to feel this. This grief, this grief wants to be felt. It's going to keep knocking on the door until we let it in, and until we really, really feel into it, we won't know that it's actually such a relief to feel it, as scary as it is. and again, like meeting this all with compassion and really like nurturing the emotion. Like, it's okay, you can be here, you can have the space to express. You can talk to yourself. You know, it's fine that I'm feeling like this. It was for me quite an incredible realization or shift when I realized that I could. You can really be there for yourself. You can really like self nurture your own emotions and stuff. It's such a powerful practice because so often we can get caught in, and just here speaking from my personal experience, when I was really struggling through the illness and I was feeling so alone, my relationship had ended, and I was kind of felt like there was no way I could turn, no one that could understand what I was going through. I felt ultimately alone and it felt so unfair because we're being conditioned, and just for me, I was conditioned to believe that I need somebody there. Like, that was one of the scariest things. It's like, I know, you know, from everything I've learned about life, that what I'm going through is crazy, and the fact that you know, in all the movies you watch and everything we read, it's like somebody always has somebody there to help them get through the tough times. And I wasn't ultimately alone. I have a lovely family that I was staying with, but it's just everybody's going through their own things, and you can just feel so alone, especially something like this, no one knowing what you're going through. And eventually, learning that this self acceptance, self compassion practices of working through my own deep emotions and comforting them and whatnot was incredible and powerful, and such a relief to realize that whatever comes up, you don't need, you've got everything you need to deal with it. It might not feel like it, and there might be a part of us that really doesn't want to believe that, and that's fine. And then we deal with that. Then we work with that, whatever comes up. But yeah, to realize that the mind will make up all these stories about why our situation is unfair, and you need something to change before you're able to deal with what you need to deal with. You know, if only I had this, if only I had that. And I'm really speaking from my own personal experience here. I'm not putting this on anybody. Kind of running through my own path, and that's just kind of an unwillingness to feel what we really don't want to feel. And when I was eventually willing to feel it, it was like I have everything I need, and I have the capacity to, whatever comes up in experience, you really are capable of feeling that. And you really, if we meet it with a sense of compassion and acceptance, and you know, are willing to cultivate some kindness towards it and meet it as if it's just a lost child that needs somebody to let it in. It's an incredible shift in repressing emotion, and it's such a relief and just feels so much better that we don't have to fight this. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't need to be scared when that emotion comes up. It's not something going wrong. It's an opportunity to let it in. So yeah. So something else I wanted to talk about, and maybe I'll make a video specifically talking about this, or maybe I'll just talk about it on this live here. But I wanted to talk about the value of inquiry. As I mean, inquiry is so powerful, and I haven't spoken about it much, but I've spoken mostly about acceptance work and not resisting, feeling, deep emotion work. Really, yeah, all about what am I resisting, which is a form of inquiry. But what can be really powerful, especially at getting to the core, it's really a more direct approach. It's a very potent approach, and that is self inquiry or inquiry. And what it does is we start to get at the structures, the identity structures, and the mind mechanisms that are causing us to suffer, or that the really core roots of what is causing us to resist, get into the roots of resistance, maybe of the suffering, or yeah, and it's a really, for like awakening, if we want to wake up out of the ego identification, the identification with thoughts. It's a really direct way to unravel that. Meditation is really helpful. This acceptance work is very helpful, specifically for when the difficult stuff is there. That's why I talk about it the most, is because if you're somebody that's struggling with chronic illness or chronic pain or this chronic fatigue, there's a lot of uncomfortable stuff at the surface already, and in that moment, that's what's making it so difficult, is our resistance to it. So how to deal with that directly, and what was key for my recovery, is that resistance work. But to really get at the core of what's driving all of this, self-inquiry is really powerful. And I haven't spoken about it much because it's a lot more linked to the deeper aspects of awakening, right? It will really get at the core roots of resistance and mind identification, and the separate self and the ego structures. So it's powerful work, and it can be disorientating because we go into the core of our identity structures. It's ideally what you're doing is you're investigating where you're identifying from. What is it's who am I? What am I identifying as? Where and we investigate that, and I'll run through it a little bit more now. But it kind of comes with a caveat or warning in that it can be disorientating. It can be it can be a roller coaster. Your whole world can seem to unravel because you're kind of starting to see through the illusion of the separate self, of the mind, of the ego. And if that's what you want, right, for a lot of, that's why I'm talking about this, if you want to get at the core roots of what's causing you to separate and suffer, and you want to get to this freedom from those patterns, and you want to awaken, right? You want to wake up from the dream of thoughts and your suffering and resistances to life, then there's great news, and you can really put that seeking energy of looking for, we can often put seeking in the external world of looking for something that's going to fulfill us, but for some people, eventually, it's seen that that's not going to work, and then maybe you start investigating spirituality or whatever. But what's great about self-inquiry is we can really harness that, the mind itself, the seeking nature of the mind to seek for experience, to unravel the mechanism itself through something like self-inquiry. And it's really important because we can meditate and we can practice acceptance work still from the perspective of a separate ego who's got control, whereas self-inquiry can really get at those identities. So that's just a little bit about self-inquiry. And if you're interested in taking this deeper, investigating this awakening stuff I talk about, or self-inquiry, no self, I recommend Angelo DeLullo's channel. He's got some great playlists on inquiry in particular. His book, Awake, It's Your Turn, is really a really comprehensive guide to this whole process. So I'll talk a little bit about inquiry and how it actually plays out in practice. So what we're doing is we're essentially feeling into where it feels like the self is. It's inquiring into the sense of self, the feeling of the me, the I, who is living this life, who is doing these practices, who is whatever, who's wanting to wake up, who's meditating. We can meditate and we can notice thoughts and we can work with resistances, but with self-inquiry, we're really trying to turn attention back on itself. If we're noticing thoughts, so this is a thought, that's a thought, who is noticing those thoughts? Where is the seat of attention where I'm sitting and noticing thoughts from? And the way this practice can often start is with lots of thoughts, and the way we start this practice is seeing that we are not the thoughts, because that's kind of really what's keeping us caught. Is each time a new thought arises, we feel like we are seeing from that thought. We feel like we are that thought. We are identified with that thought. So maybe you decide you want to practice the self-inquiry. Maybe you read a bit about it. Maybe you watch a video on Angelo's channel, or you listen to me, and you're like, okay, I'm going to feel into the sense of self. So let me sit. Maybe it can be great to meditate for a bit, maybe for 5-10 minutes, just to get out of the head a bit, and then you start to do this practice. And what often happens is there's just lots of thoughts, and we keep on getting caught up in the thoughts. So I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, that's a thought. That is just a thought. It's before we realize that it's a thought, we feel like that's us. So I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Feels like you. But once you notice that it's a thought, then you can continue the inquiry. Okay, that's a thought. What is noticing that? That's not me. Okay, and we can do this with an inquiry question, and the most powerful question is often, who am I? So you can sit there and you can say, who am I? And then notice for the thoughts that come up. Who am I? Maybe your name comes up. I am Kyle. I am Bob. I am whatever. Okay, that's a thought. Who is noticing that thought? Who am I? I am, and all our other identities, places that we feel like we're getting our identity from, will come up, but we start to see that it's all just thoughts. I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a father, a mother, a doctor, a lawyer, a surfer, a athlete. Oh, that's a thought. That whatever comes up, that's a thought. Okay, who am I? Who is noticing those thoughts? And then again, it can be like, is this a thought? Am I doing this right? Where is this supposed to take me? That's a thought. So really, for a long time when we start this practice, it can be no, it's really about noticing a thought as a thought. And I remember when I started this self-inquiry, I was learning it from Angelo's YouTube channel, and again, there was so much doubt and frustration that would come up. Like, I bet you I'm not doing it right. I know there's so many thoughts. I'm not finding. It's not taking me deeper. Like everyone talks about how this is a very powerful practice and it can help you to wake up. And I'm just in these thoughts all the time. But the more you keep coming back, and for me, applying it with meditation was so powerful because the mind would quieten a bit, and then it would be looking into where am I noticing the thoughts from? Because in meditation, a lot of the time I was noticing thoughts. My practice was putting attention on the breath, and then as soon as I get lost in thoughts and I wake up, then back on the breath. And then eventually, if I was doing a long meditation, then at the end I would start to feel into, okay, but where am I watching the thoughts from? And if a thought arises, can I feel into the thought? And then who is watching the thought? And it's not a conceptual practice. It's not something you're going to find an answer to conceptually. It's a feeling practice. It's what eventually, and I don't want to say there's a goal to it, but the more you start to disidentify from the thoughts, and that's a thought, who am I? You start to investigate the sense of I. There can be a feeling of the way I think about it when I'm doing my practice is what is the sensation of I? So there's I am sitting and meditating. Well, what does the I feel like? Like the place where it feels like I am. What is the sensation of that like? And then you kind of just explore that, and then the mind can become quieter. But it took me a long time before I even got that deep, right? It's always just about starting where you're at. So it's initially it can be just working with thoughts. Who am I? What am I? What is noticing the thoughts? Where am I in this experience? Where am I? Where is the I? And then an alertness and a willingness to see a thought as a thought. And whatever comes up is going to be a thought, really. So I don't know where I am. This doesn't make any sense. This is frustrating. I want to go and do something else. Thought. And it's a really important nuance here that can be really helpful with the practice is not to, we can so often do it by trying to push away thoughts like, oh, okay, that's a thought. That's wrong. That's not what I'm looking for. But a really helpful way to do this is to lean into the thoughts. Use the thoughts can be your entry points for this inquiry, right? So a thought comes up. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, that's a thought. Can I feel into the texture of that thought? So you can maybe even repeat the thought in your mind or out loud, whatever. I don't know what I'm doing. What is the thought made out of, right? What does that thought feel like? And then you can feel into the I-ness of that thought. So that thought is referring to an I. It's saying, I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So now we're feeling into the texture of that, and then we try to start to feel into the I texture. So I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so the thought is referring to me, an I that doesn't know what I'm doing. Now can I look who is noticing that I? So the thought has a, I'm doing this, I'm going to do that, later I'm going to go get some food. Okay, but who is doing this practice right now? Where am I noticing that I from? So that's a really great adjustment to self-inquiry practice, is to use a thought to point you back towards what you're actually looking for. And what you're looking for is where it feels like you are. And again, it's really about a willingness to keep coming back, because at first it can feel very frustrating, it can feel very confusing, it can feel very difficult. But the more we do it, it can slowly start to develop, and we start to go deeper. And then you're just really always feeling back into where it feels like you are. And then you just stay there until the next thought comes up. And then can you notice that it's a thought and not jump on the thought train? Because what happens is a thought reflects a thought reflects a thought. So there's a thought that arises, and if we don't see it as a thought, then it's the next thought. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I should carry on doing this. This doesn't make any sense. I think I'm going to get up. I think I'm going to do that. And then we're back in the thought stream completely, and not even realizing it. So that's just a little bit on self-inquiry and a little bit on how to develop the practice. And I do recommend Angelo's work is a very good guide on self-inquiry. His channel is Simply Always Awake, and his book is Awake It's Your Turn. And it's really it's the most powerful practice, one of the most powerful practices for really waking up out of the separate self and the separate ego, and our own resistance. And it's a really, really powerful adjunctive practice. I don't know if adjunctive is the right word. It feels like it's a word. To meditation and emotion work and non-resistance, because it really can get to the core of all what's causing all of that resistance. So the other practices are really, it all goes really well together. Meditation to calm the mind and to open a little bit more spaciousness, and then acceptance and emotion work and compassion work to work with the difficult stuff that comes up, and then self-inquiry to really use the mind itself to wake up from the mind. So that's, I haven't spoken much about inquiry because it's more got to do with the deeper aspects of awakening, that it's a big shift, right? So it's only really if it feels what you want, right? It's not for the faint of heart. You kind of you face everything. So, but if it's what you want, it's really can be the end of your suffering. So, anyways, we don't. I haven't had many people on this live, so I might end it soon. If I see, it says there's 2 people. I think one of that is my computer that I use for the live chat. If there's anybody here that wants to ask any questions or share anything or request anything to talk about, you're welcome to. I'll maybe sit for a little bit. I'll just sit here and meditate for a bit, see if anybody comes on, but otherwise we might wrap it up soon. But feel free to sit with me, to ask a question, to yeah, whatever. So I'm doing this for the live replay. I'm going to close off with a short guided meditation. So if anybody does watch this replay and you listen to what we've spoken about so far, I always like to close off with a guided meditation because, again, it's always about actually doing the work. We can think about it, we can listen to talks, we can read books, but then when whatever's coming up, the difficult stuff is coming up or whatever, it's really about can we sit and feel. So I know for some people, even just spending some time watching videos can be bring up some symptoms. It used to be like that for me. Even sometimes now I can still, if I'm distracting myself a lot, can get some contractions and resistances in the body from that. So a great way to finish it off is just taking some time to sit and feel what's here. So let's do that. So a great place to always start is just to feel into the sensations of the body. What happens so often is we get caught up in the head, in the thoughts, and there's resistances in the body that we're not wanting to go down and feel. But that's what's driving this whole thing. As soon as we start to explore what's actually there, what's feeling uncomfortable, and we let it just be felt, then everything can kind of relax. So always just, maybe you can start with your breath. And what's key here is it's just a noticing. It's not a trying to make something a certain way. We're not trying to control the breath here. We're not trying to control the body or the sensations in the body. It's really just an exploration of what is in experience right now. What does it feel like if I don't try to resist or to grasp? I'm not trying to push and pull on experience. I'm not trying to make more of a certain experience and less of a certain experience. What if I just explore whatever is here right now? And then we really go to the sensation. And if while you're doing this, it feels like there's something you don't want to feel, then that's great. Then we go there and we explore that. What is this experience that I don't want to feel? What happens if I drop that, or I let that be there, the resistance even, and just explore the direct experience of it? What in the direct experience of this sensation is not supposed to be here? Can I drop any agendas of what's supposed to be happening and just open up to what is happening? It's almost a surrendering to life itself, to the present moment. What if I just have no finger on the scale? It can feel like complete vulnerability. Just being completely open to whatever experience comes up. What if I drop any thoughts of past and future and just be with what's here right now? What is always here underneath all the thoughts? And just rest. You don't need to make anything happen. All right. And then just remember that we always have the opportunity to pause and kind of just explore what's here at any moment. And no matter how busy it feels like we are, there's always this place that's unchanged. That's what it feels like is always here. Just keep dropping back and letting go of agendas and just exploring what's here. We can keep doing that. Okay, I think we'll end the live stream there. Thank you to everybody that joined us. I hope some people watch the replay and find it helpful, because we didn't have a lot of people joining us live. Anyways, all the best to everybody, and lots of love, and good luck with doing all the work that life brings forward for you.